As a kid, my mother always made sure that we had a Sunday dinner. It was usually always some type of soulful meal that took a few hours, and I've kind of taken on that tradition myself. I had a taste for some ribs and decided to do my own dinner. Let's do it. My original plan was to go and get on a grill, but I decided I just didn't want to do all that today. So I decided I would just go ahead and bake my ribs. Now, normally when I do this soaking process, it is to make sure the ribs are tender on the grill. But because I was kind of pressed for time, I still decided to soak my ribs. Even though we were going to bake them, I knew that this would cut down the cooking time and they would still be tender and falling off the bone. So to start, I just opened up my ribs and I pulled off that lining off the back. It's so funny because when I was growing up, I don't think my mother ever knew to take this off, and sometimes I would bite into the rib and that little skin would still be there, but I don't think anyone ever realized you're really not supposed to eat that. I don't think anything harmful can be done if you do, but it definitely is a better biting experience if you take it off. So if you haven't been doing that, please do it. And plus it helps the marinade to get through as well. So once I peeled off that lining, I went and rinsed everything off. You are going to get a large bag. We have like these clear like bags that we normally use as like garbage bags, but they're super clean and we're just soaking. So you can use that if you have a bag that you can use. If not, just use a brand new garbage bag or any super large bag that you have. So I took my ribs and I placed them in the bag. You're going to go ahead and sprinkle them with some baking soda, and then you're going to add just enough vinegar to coat, to activate the baking soda. Usually I try to do this a minimum of 24 hours in advance, but if you can do this for 48 hours in advance, it's actually going to be the best. And like I said, normally I do this for the grill. This was actually my first time doing this, putting them in the oven, but I do think that it cut down on the cooking time and the ribs were really tender. But if you, and I know if you've seen my previous video, you know I said some people boil their ribs to make them tender. If you do this, you do not have to do that at all. So this is kind of like, just like a little trick to make sure that your ribs are nice and tender.
Baby, let me love you. Let me love you. Baby, let me love you. Love you. Baby, you're my muse. I wanna see you move. Baby, let me love you. Love you.
Okay, once everything was in a bag, I just tied it in a knot, put it on a pan, and put it in my refrigerator. Of course, I'm going to go ahead and clean my sink. I know people have a fit when you have meat in the sink, but you can't clean your sink. So if you don't feel comfortable doing that, maybe put like a little tub or something to put your meat in, and you can clean them and cut everything up like that. But I just gave my sink a good cleaning before I went on to the next step. Okay, so this is a couple of days later. We're going to get started on the actual meal. I am going to start on my greens because they will take a while. I am using smoked meat. I decided to use smoked turkey because we are going to have pork and I didn't want so much pork going on with the meal, but I just take them out of the container, clean off any feathers. I give them a good rinse and then put them in a pot. I usually try to cover the meat with water just until it just about reaches the top of the meat because the greens are going to create their own liquid as well. And I did not want too much liquid in my pot, so I just got my smoked meat going. Back in the day, I used to cook my smoked meat separate for a couple of hours and then add my greens. But I don't know what happened. But a few years ago, I started just cooking everything together. I don't know if I saw someone do that, but I do think that it gives gives the greens more depth and flavor when you just cook them all together. So I get my meat going and then I start on my greens. I'm actually using Glory greens because I'm just trying to find any way I can to cut back on time. You guys know I still have a 1-year-old. I'm working and I do want to get more videos out. So anything that I can do to save time for myself, including getting grocery delivery, I'm taking advantage of it, guys. Like, we have to do whatever we can to get more time back in our day. I'm tired of my days being dedicated to other things that are laborious and I don't have time to enjoy it. So whatever I can do to help minimize any laborious activities, I'm definitely going to do that. But with these greens, they do come pre-washed, but I still like to go through them because they do have a lot of stems. And then I take all of that out and move them on over to the pot. And I have all my greens in the pot. Of course, they're going to be reduced to about half. So I'm going to move on to my sweet potatoes while those greens are cooking. I used to boil my potatoes first. I know some people peel them raw, but I just like to bake mine. I bake them, clean them off, bake them until they're about fork tender, and then that helps me to peel them easily. So while those are baking, I go ahead and I started getting my seasonings together for my greens. I just had some red and green bell pepper, some onions, and some garlic. I put a little bit of vinegar in my pot, and I just blended that together. I don't really want the pieces of the vegetables showing. I'm just putting them in there more so for flavor. So I kind of emulsified them down into just like a minced paste and added them to my greens. So at this point, my greens have been cooking for maybe about 30 minutes, and you can see how far down they've reduced. But they're going to be cooking for several hours. They're pretty much going to cook until the meat is tender and falling off the bone. And I did add some dry seasonings. I added some Tony Satchery Creole seasoning, black pepper, a little bit of salt, garlic, onion powder, and some chicken bouillon, because even though we're using turkey wings, they don't really have that strong of a flavor like a ham hock or something like that would. So I definitely added some additional chicken bouillon. So now that the greens are cooking, I'm going to get started on my ribs. Now you can see that they have been marinating overnight and they do not have any change in color or anything like that. So they still look fresh, and I just cleaned them off. Make sure if you do that method, make sure you rinse them very, very well. And then I just cleaned them off, trimmed off any fat, and I seasoned them with some black pepper, pretty much the same seasonings that I always use. If you follow me, well, I'm not gonna say always, it just depends on what is being cooked. So I did use some black pepper, garlic, some onion powder, of course my Tony Satchery, salt, a little bit of crushed red pepper, but I did use some mustard as a binding agent just to keep all of the seasonings together, because we're going to wrap these really tight in foil. I know you can put them in a roasting pan, but for some reason I like cooking them in the foil. It just gives it more of a, I don't know, it just doesn't fall apart too much. It gives me still kind of a little bit of texture that I like, but that's just my method and what I like to do.
Baby, let me love you.
once they were nice and tight, I just put them in the oven for 350 degrees. I'm gonna let them cook for about an hour and a half before I start to baste them. At this point, my sweet potatoes were ready, so you can see their natural juices are rendering. And I don't know what it is about the baking that causes that to come out, but I really like how that helps with the flavor, the natural flavor of the sweet potato. So once they were done, I just peeled them. And I like my sweet potatoes kind of chunky, so I do kind of cut bigger chunks. So once I peeled them off, I just cut them up in chunks and lay them in my casserole dish. From there, I just take a stick of butter and I cut them into little pats and I just stick them throughout my potatoes. I like to do it while they're still hot so they can get nice and melted. And then I take maybe about a half a cup of white sugar and a half a cup of brown sugar, and then I sprinkle that on top of my potatoes. And then in another bowl, I take about another quarter cup of white sugar and a quarter cup of brown sugar because I'm going to make like a syrup. And then I add about a half teaspoon of salt. The salt helps to bring out the sweetness or the flavor in the dish. It just helps make desserts taste good. And then I put maybe like 1.5 teaspoons of some lemon extract. I also put some vanilla extract. And then I add some cinnamon and some nutmeg. I just kind of eyeball this, guys. I don't really have an exact recipe, but I just want to bring you along with me while I'm cooking my dinner. And then I add my vanilla and I add some water. Not too much water, but just enough to kind of create like a loose syrup. And then I take that and I just pour it all over my potatoes. And then I'm going to cover them with foil and put them back in the oven. The ribs are in the oven, so I'm still going to keep them in there at the 350. They're probably going to bake about another hour, maybe like 45 minutes, and then I baste them and put them back in the oven for another 15 minutes. But now look at the greens. So you can see that that meat is starting to fall off of those turkey bones. You can see that everything is nice and condensed. So once it gets to this stage, I just take the meat off, let them fall off the bone, pick all the meat off, and then I just discard the bones.
Baby, let me love you. Let me love you. Baby, let me love you. Baby, you're my muse. I wanna see you move. Baby, let me love you.
And then at this point, the greens are pretty much done. I'm just kind of breaking the meat up a little bit. I know some people take the skin out. If you don't like the skin in your greens, you can get rid of them. I pretty much just leave them in for flavor. I don't really eat it, but I do eat the meat that we've taken off. And so now I'm going to prepare my sauce. I usually try to mix whatever kind of sauces I have just to kind of create a different flavor. My husband makes an amazing homemade barbecue sauce, but he was doing some housework. So I just came up with my own little concoction. I have some Stubbs barbecue sauce, and then I have some Sweet Baby Ray's. I just kind of took what I had left in the 2 smaller bottles, added a little bit of water to get everything out, and then put them in my pan. That water did take the flavor away a little bit, so I added just a little bit of flavor to get it back where I prefer. I added a little bit of brown sugar and a little bit of onion powder, whisked that together, let it simmer, and then I got everything prepared to baste my ribs. Now, before I did that, I went and checked on my sweet potatoes. As you can see, the liquid has kind of soaked up into the potatoes, but I just went and basted them a little bit with some of that sauce. And then I'm going to put them back in the oven for about 15 more minutes, and then they'll be done. And then I'm going to take my ribs out of the foil and get them basted. I actually basted them twice. So once I took my ribs out, and you can see, look at that, you can see how the bone is already peeking through, and this is only an hour and a half. And that's what I was saying about that, soaking them in the vinegar and the baking soda. Look at those bones peeking through. You can just literally pull the meat right off. So I take my ribs out of the foil, and I like to sit them up on a rack because I like them to have a nice little crust. And I think that's the thing that I love about a grilled rib is you have that nice crispiness. Whereas if you bake your ribs in a roasting pot, everything is going to be soft. And that's cool, but I like a little bit of texture. So I take them out, put them on a rack. I basted them. I turned the oven up to 400 degrees. And then I put them in for about 15 minutes. Take them out. I basted them a second time. Put them back in the oven for another 15 minutes. And then for my final base, I just baste them and then leave them. So total cooking time was about 2 hours.
Girl, it's our time, just you and I. Don't run, don't hide, no. I'll do it right. We've got all.
Baby, look at them ribs. Look at those ribs. They look so good. Look at that. This is after the second bake, and this is just my final baste. But, oh, baby, I'll tell you something right now. After this meal, you're going to be going to sleep. This is what you call an itis meal. You eat it, it's giving you the itis. All right, and so now the sweet potatoes are done, and you can see that pretty much all of that liquid has been absorbed into the potatoes. They are so flavorful. That bit of lemon extract, it just does something to ignite the flavor in the sweet potato. But I wanted to cut into the rib, and you can see how tender. When I say fall off the bone, I can't even cut it without that meat just sliding off that bone. Look at that meat. You see that? So tender. We have a nice little texture, a little bit of crust from cooking them uncovered. I forgot to say uncovered. Uncovered at 400 degrees. But look at that meat. It's nice and juicy. It's flavorful. We're going to go ahead and plate it up, baby, because we were ready to eat. So I got my potatoes together. And I don't like to cook my put my greens on the same plate because I don't want that green juice sliding over to my potatoes. So I only put my potatoes and my ribs on the plate, and then I'm going to put the greens in a separate bowl. Okay, and there's dinner. We're ready to eat. We got our ribs, our potatoes, and greens. I appreciate you guys spending your Sunday with me. And hey, if you want to make this meal, go ahead and give it a try. I surely appreciate you. Thanks for watching.